He boarded with a name that opens doors and a ticket that leaves no doubt. A black billionaire, a reserved first-class seat, a routine flight.
No.
Then a white passenger slides into the seat and dares the rules to move him. The cabin goes quiet. Eyes flicker, phones lift, and suddenly the engines go idle. The plane turns back to the gate. It wasn't just a seat, it was a line. Stay with this story to see what broke next, Dan. Who paid the price? Because if power and proof couldn't protect him, what happens to those without either? Before the headlines, he was just a man on a schedule. A black billionaire who measured his days in miles and meetings, still made room for what mattered. A call to his mother, a scholarship approval, a quiet check-in with a mentee. Had given him access, not amnesia. He still arrived early, still carried light, still expected the same respect he offered. Airports were routine, almost meditative. Boarding pass in the left pocket, passport in the right, the soft thrum of the jetway promising 1 hour of stillness before the next demand. First class was an indulgence. It was focus. A seat meant space, and space meant breathing room, the kind he had earned and protected that morning. He was headed south to speak at a youth center he funded, then straight into a boardroom. The sky was clear, emails stacked up, and his mind was already on the speech he'd deliver. At the gate, the scene felt ordinary. Rolling bags, muted announcements, glances that slid past and sometimes stuck for a fraction too long. He let them slide off. He had work to do. The scanner chirped. Cool cabin air wrapped around warm skin. The leather gleamed. His name glowed on the small screen above a seat that was not just comfort, but certainty. A promise printed on paper and backed by policy. He didn't know that this seat would become a boundary tested in public, that the quiet of his morning would be the first thing taken. He reached his row and found certainty occupied. His name glowed on the screen above the headrest, but a stranger's shoulders filled the space. The man settled in with the ease of someone who expected the world to bend. The billionaire lifted. His boarding pass, steady hand, steady breath. Around him, conversation thinned to a hush that sounded like decisions being made. A flight attendant arrived, eyes landing on him first. Proof was requested from the person who had already proven it. Numbers matched, seat confirmed. Then the attention shifted to the man in the seat's softened tone, apologetic smile, a suggestion that this was an innocent mix-up. The man barely moved, a small shrug, a smirk that looked like ownership. The first tremor was not loud, but it was clear. He was the one being vetted. Policy competed with convenience. Another attendant appeared, eager to keep the aisle flowing, to keep the departure times sacred. An offer to place him elsewhere, farther back, just for this one flight, just to keep things easy. The solution arrived dressed as compromise, but it was balance paid from one pocket. He shook his head. He had paid for the exact right to be there. He had earned the expectation that the rules would hold. Minutes stretched. Eyes multiplied. Phones rose. He felt the familiar scan of a room calculating his presence wealth, noted blackness foregrounded, belonging questioned. A couple offered quiet sympathy with a glance. Others cast the kind of look that made him the problem, instead of the problem being the problem. He kept his posture open, his voice low, his gestures careful. Every move was a choice between dignity and danger. The attendants huddled with a tablet, their whispers threaded with urgency. Standby lists, upgrade errors, gate misprints, anything. But the simplest truth, a man refused to move from a seat that was not his. The man in the seat leaned back with the confidence of someone who would be protected by patience and protocol. The billionaire remained standing at the line where two versions of the same reality collided. A chime cut through. The captain's. Cadence floated from the ceiling, calm, neutral, the sound of delay. Wheels that should have rolled stayed still. The cabin breathed in frustration. He counted the cost, a youth center waiting on his words. A board meeting arranged around his time, the daily calculus of a life optimized to leave room for giving. What message would surrender send to the kids who believed him when he told them? To claim what they've earned? Another attendant stepped closer, posture tense. If there was no movement, there would be escalation. It's not for the one holding the wrong seat, but for the one insisting on the right one. He felt the weight of 1,000 small moments like this, doors held for others. Assumptions that trailed him like shadows, the slow drip that carves a stone. He chose calm again. The hum of the engines deepened, then softened, as if the plane itself couldn't decide whether to leave. A murmur swept the cabin, the kind that precedes consequences. The jetway reattached with a mechanical sigh. The aisle cleared as if bracing for weather. Then the door cracked open, and a sliver of fluorescent hallway cut the cabin in two. Figure appeared at the threshold, a badge catching the light. The next decision would not be about a seat anymore, would be about who, in that moment, counted as a disruption. The badge stepped in, followed by another, and the air changed from inconvenience to threat. Their eyes landed on him first, not the man enjoying leather he hadn't earned. He held out the proof again, name, number, seat glowing above like. A quiet witness and watched it be treated as an argument rather than a fact. The cabin leaned in. Cameras rose like a forest. The framing slid into place with practiced ease. He was holding up the flight. He was refusing to cooperate. He was the variable that could be removed to restore order. The man in the seat became a mix-up, a misunderstanding that needed a gentle fix. Authority squared its shoulders at the easier target, and the easier target had skin like his. He took inventory of the moment. The youth center waiting on his voice. The board aligning around his schedule. The message his choice would send to kids who'd been told to accept less to keep the peace. He found his breath and anchored himself to the simplest truth. The rules were written down, and they were supposed to protect everyone. Engines spooled down to a low murmur. The cabin lights went stark. The jetway clamped on. He felt the math tightening. Compliance would buy quiet at the cost of dignity. Resistance would be recorded, reinterpreted, repackaged. A gloved hand hovered near a radio. An attendant, eyes pleading for an easy out, tilted toward compromise. The man in the seat stared past him, as if the problem might vanish if he did. The call came. He was the disruption to be removed, not the refusal, not the entitlement. Him, he absorbed it the way a cliff takes waves, battered but unmoved. He made the calculation no one would see from the outside. He stepped back, choosing safety over spectacle, testimony over escalation. The aisle opened like a verdict. The plane sat motionless, grounded not by weather but by a choice. As the door closed behind him and the cameras followed, a single question rose above the hum of the terminal. If the truth in his hand wasn't enough in first class, what chance did anyone have in the last row? He stepped into the terminal with cameras at his back and the chill of the jet bridge on his skin. The plane pushed off without him. The man in his seat stayed seated. An airline agent handed over a rebooking like a bandage for a wound that went deeper than time. He sat by a window and watched the runway blur. The weight of what had just happened pressing into his chest heavy, was familiar, undeserved. By evening, the clip circled the globe. Headlines softened the truth into misunderstanding, then sharpened as more angles emerged. Messages poured in, strangers with the same story, different airports, identical outcome. Flight crews reached out quietly, saying they saw it too, and felt trapped between policy and pressure. The airline promised a review. He didn't want a performance, he wanted a record. He filed the report, kept the receipts. He made it too. The youth center late, but still showed up. A room of kids waited, eyes bright, hungry for a world that wouldn't shrink them. He didn't give them a fairy tale, he gave them the truth. A seat isn't just a seat, it's the space you've earned to exist without being questioned. He left with their drawings in his bag and a new resolve in his bones. In the days that followed, he moved with purpose. A donation to legal aid for travelers. A push for clear boarding protocols that don't default to suspicion. Calls with executives who prefer comfort over confrontation. He knew this was not about one flight, it was about the pattern that makes some people the problem, even when the facts are on their side. This story is not rare. It happens in aisles and lobbies, at counters and crosswalks. Protect him at the front of the plane, who gets protected in the last row. If you felt this, Don't let it fade. Share the story. Tell yours in the comments. Ask your airlines what they're changing. In the next time a line is drawn between convenience and justice, which side will you stand on?